Next up, we have Dr. Richard O'Leary, who's giving presentation Heritage in Lockdown, the LGBT Heritage Project, Northern Ireland. Richard needs no introduction, but go ahead, Richard, and tell us a bit about your work.
Right, I'm just about to start slideshow. Can you all see it?
Mm-hmm.
Good. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to give you the reduced LGBT Heritage Project, that is reduced to 17 slides. And I want to share with you how the project, since its launch 13 months ago, has been shaped by the coronavirus pandemic and survived under lockdown. So this will not just maybe introduce some of you to the project, but also to show how an LGBT Heritage Project might adapt to the exceptional circumstances that we've had. Our project is called The Troubles I've Seen, and it's a 2-year project funded by the Northern Ireland Lottery Heritage Fund, led by Here and I in partnership with Cara Friend and the Rainbow Project. And its aims are to collect, share and conserve the hidden heritage of the LGBT community in Northern Ireland in the 1980s and 1990s. This is a modestly funded project. I'm the only paid staff and I'm employed on a part-time basis. So there's it's the first of its kind we've had here. So there's potentially a lot that could be done. The image on this slide is of the pop-up banner for the project, which was designed by Ruth McCarthy, but because of lockdown, I've never been able to physically show it in public. So this evening, I put it up in the corner of this room in my own house. Here's a slide of the launch we had on the 26th of February, 2020 at the Ulster Museum. It was great that the Ulster Museum hosted our launch, which is indicative of their interest in what we do. That's me on the right, dressed up in my late 1980s gay leather clone gear. No, I'm not pointing to the dress. I'm pointing to a 1980s telephone with external listening piece. And this is one of the original telephones used by the helpline service Cara Friend in the 1980s. And that telephone was the first and only object donated to the project before we went into lockdown. Now, at the launch, I outlined our plans, and the plans were to recruit and to train volunteers, arrange for the volunteers to visit the archives at the Linden Library and at the Public Records Office at Prony, to collect for members of the public historical LGBT materials, to be present at Pride events and other communal gatherings, to host a physical exhibition, to coordinate the volunteers to conduct face-to-face oral history interviews. They were already penciled in for May of 2020 to commission a documentary. However, within 3 weeks of our launch, we were ambushed by the coronavirus, and I was sent home from my office, taking with me boxes of hundreds of newly printed name cards, which I realize I will probably never get to hand out. And I've worked the last year at home. That's what it felt like when we went into lockdown. Those early plans for face-to-face interviews cancelled, visits to the archives abandoned. So it was back to the drawing board. And that's when I reimagined the project as one that could develop and exist entirely online. Now, for a project to exist online, you need both online content and an online audience. And when they don't already exist, you have to create them. So for the online content, the first person to provide me with it was Karen McShane. And this is the poster to advertise the first public event I organized for the project, Transgender Day Visibility, 31st of March 2020, a talk and chat with Karen McShane online. We didn't even have Zoom then. We were using a platform called Jitsi. So we really were making it up as we go along. And I was conscious in both our society and in LGBT history that we've had an issue of lesbian invisibility. And because I'm employed by an organization that works with lesbian and bi women, I made an effort at the outset to source online content about lesbian history. And thanks to people like Heather Fleming for another one of our early online events, Her Story with Heather. And Heather was an activist in the late 70s and 80s, and she would have told at an online event like this about her experiences. And we realized that being online was a bit strange, but it also allowed people who were not living in Belfast or who had mobility issues or might not otherwise not have got to a physical event were actually able to attend Her Story with Heather. So that was about the content, but in terms of finding the audience, and I must admit, until a year ago, I was a social media virgin. So I had to get my colleague Danielle here and I to set me up on Twitter and Facebook. And our handle is at LGBT History NI. I've posted it in the chat. So we use social media for letting people know that this project existed, advertising our online events, and sharing material on LGBT history on social media, which can act as a temporary archive. Here's a screen of shot I took this morning of our Twitter account advertising tonight's event, and I'm delighted to say we have now amassed almost 1,000 followers. So that is itself a way of raising awareness within our own community and within the wider community that there is something like LGBT history that exists, because just even in our own community and general population, there can be certain assumptions about how long queer people have been living their lives and what their experiences have been in the past. Now, this project is based around volunteers, and I'm employed as a coordinator of volunteers and of the project. And I use social media to recruit volunteers. So I would have held, well, I put out on social media that I was looking for volunteers, but also would have held an information night, which some of our current volunteers attended. And I said, look, this is the deal. It's voluntary. So, that means you can decide how much to put in, but here are some expectations I have in terms of hours, and these are the range of activities. And amazingly, I found these volunteers, and this is a screenshot of the induction meeting of the 16 original volunteers. I won't name them all now, but I'll refer to some of their names as we go along. And I suppose this is what an LGBT Heritage Project online during lockdown often looks like. This is the way you meet. And of course, these would have been volunteers who typically did not know each other, and many of them did not know me. All our meetings have taken place online, and that includes our training and our activities and our public events. We've since moved to Zoom. And we have to conform to social distancing, so the volunteers have learned to work remotely. And as the physical archives, Public Records Office or Lindenhall Library or others have been shut, we've had to find and work with online resources where we can source them. And to date, I've never been able to have a physical meeting with my project volunteers, which I'm looking forward to very much sometime in the future. And I've been very fortunate in the volunteers in terms of their interest, their generosity with their time and skills, their patience around the timetabling of activities, and their flexibility. So so much of what you'll see in the rest of the presentation is reflection of the quality of the volunteers who have signed up for this project. So one of the first activities I did with the volunteers was to set up a monthly LGBT history club. And I did this in partnership with the Lindenhall Library, which is one of our veritable institutions. So it's kind of, again, link up with a very respected organization, I suppose, gives additional publicity and credibility to LGBT history. But we couldn't meet physically, so we have been meeting online, and we've had 7 monthly meetings. And this is a poster of our first meeting, which was last July, which has the kick-ass title of Sex and the Irish City, Queer Belfast in the early 20th century. Tom Hume is a great speaker, but of course, if you put sex in the title, it does increase the ratings. So we had a great turnout. I mean, maybe 60 people, and we've had a few hundred viewings online of this recorded talk. So delighted with that. And we, had a talk the following month by one of our volunteers, Amy Finley Jeffrey, whose talk was on Mary Dorsey, lesbian activist poet. And another one of our volunteers, Nadine. Now, why I've just hit the button for the next slide and it hasn't come on for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to escape. Okay, I'm stuck in this slide. Oh, it's come on now, good. So Nadine gave this cracker talk on Belfast Pink Press, 1970s and 1990s. And there's an illustration of one of the queer zines from the 1990s called Moth Monsters on Prozac. So if you want to know more about Moth Monsters on Prozac, you'll find the recording of this talk on the YouTube channel of the Lindhall Library. In fact, one of our volunteers, Molly, who's here tonight, who works with Mid-Ulster Pride, she had a follow-up event talking with Ruth McCarthy of Moth Monsters on Prozac fame. So there's even another opportunity to learn more about that subject. Oh my God, the time's going so fast, and I told Adam to be really strict, so I've got to hurry up. Our next monthly meeting is next Monday night, and I'm actually the speaker, and it's on Ulster's Lesser Spotted Queer Protestant, and you can sign up for that by going to the website imaginebelfast.com or to our own social media. But that is what a typical LGBT History Club night looks like. I should say that I deliberately opted for the Zoom meeting format because I felt that during lockdown, we really miss meeting, because the pubs are closed and our organizations can't meet. So I said the next best thing is to be able to meet in a kind of communal way at the LGBT History Club where people can see each other, they can chat privately, and I do feel it's given us a sense of community and it's been good for well-being, even though there's a trade-off in terms of the quality of the recording if you go for the Zoom. And then, we had during the summer, it was like a bit easier to get out there. So our volunteers, they went out and they recorded on their phones, all this is DIY stuff, little videos called Places of Pride. And this is a volunteer, Grania Starth, and she's outside what would have been in the 1990s, the Parliament gay bar, and she's just telling people, this was the Parliament, and she used to go there herself, socializing. So those videos are up on our project YouTube channel, but our other volunteers, Fran did a piece standing outside the site of the 1990s Limelight Disco on Ormore Avenue. Garrett stood on Botanic Avenue talking about the Queer Space organization. Siobhan, who's here tonight, she told us all about the statue created by the sculptor Louise Walsh, which caused a great fuss in Belfast at the time. Elspeth stood outside Cathedral Buildings, which was one of the original kind of gay organizational venues. Nadine stood outside the University Students' Union, and Michael stood outside the place where the Gay Christian Fellowship met. So that was a way, I suppose, of adapting to lockdown restrictions on what we could do and just do DIY videos of Places of Pride. but other volunteers have been able to do some archival research. They couldn't get into the physical archives at Linhall Library, but the library does have digitized copies of Women's News magazine, and this is the front cover of Women's News from, I think, 1992. But a group of volunteers then actually went on to do our research about the lesbian and bi women's contribution to the feminist Women's News magazine, and they actually made a presentation, which is excellent, last Saturday for Out in the Past at the Museum of Free Derry, and that's but that's what happens when you work in a heritage project. It's all recorded. And I should say that having some social activities, I think it's a good thing for a heritage project online, because you know, we can help maybe volunteers get to know each other a bit better, but also I think you know, not all volunteers are necessarily identifying as LGBTQ, because I made it clear that, you know, anyone who wants to work in this area is welcome, but I think most of us are, and participating in a project like this, I think, can be good for well-being. I know it certainly helped me at times during lockdown, and I think some of the other volunteers have felt just learning about their own history and sharing with others, and also maybe meeting people from the community online has actually been good for health and well-being. Indeed, one of our volunteers did a presentation about the well-being benefits of doing LGBT heritage. Still trying to be resourceful, because we couldn't really get access to the public to donate things the way you might more easily if you're not in lockdown. And of course the archives were closed, so we had a thing called Queer Objects, including queer objects that you might have your own house, which is surprising what you can find. Here's one of our volunteers, Michael Fryer, who's showing a theatre program which pertains to a performance by Ian McKellen from the 1980s. The program is from that, and Michael recorded a video at home talking about this queer object that he has at home, and Molly did one on the play Angels in America. Amy did it on a queer Christmas jumper. Elizabeth did it on the book Threads, Stories of Lesbian Life in Northern Ireland. And Nadine did it about a coffee table from that same Parliament bar, which has ended up in her house. So those queer objects we put out in December as part of our queer Advent calendar. But moving on, we were delighted to partner with the Public Records Office. Prony Lindsay is here tonight, and we had an 8-week program, which was, they called it Making the Future, but within that, we had a session where we presented again at an online event our queer objects, and these some of the queer objects that the participants on that program presented. And these again would have been objects from our own homes, and just I suppose shows you that you don't have to be old to have LGBT heritage. You know, you can talk about objects that that you know of, or also we are making, you know, history in 2020 and in 2021, and that can also be documented, even though the focus of my project is meant to be on the 80s and 90s. I've relaxed that a bit. So we've also, of course, engaged with the material, the be archived at Northern Ireland Screen, and thanks to Sinead Vanach Cashel at NI Screen, and for digitizing some of that material and making it available to our volunteers, because, and Lindsay showed you some of it tonight, that's material which we would like to share with a wider audience. In the short term, we can do that through our Twitter, Facebook, and Insta posts, but I've been proceeding knowing that we are not likely now to have a physical exhibition, to put more emphasis on having a digital archive. And we're very fortunate in Ireland to have a pioneer in this field. Orla Egan, Orla's actually here tonight. Orla has set up the Cork LGBT digital archive, and that's been an example for us. So we had Orla in to give us training about how she has set up the Cork regional digital archive. That's using specialist software called Omaka, and she's provided training to our volunteers on that. And this is an example. Ours hasn't gone live yet. I'm hoping to go live in the middle of next month, but this is a facility where you can upload an image or a video clip, and you can write a description of what it is, and this would be of useful aid to other researchers, but also is in a format that even members of the public could browse. This is an example of a letter sent to the Car Friend organization, which can be viewed online with some redaction, and then people can read a bit about the context of that item. So that's some work which is going on behind the scenes. So keep an eye out for that next month. And I'm conscious of time, so I did delay attempting any interviews because of the health situation and the requirement of social distancing, but we've had training. This is a screenshot of a training session we've had on oral history, interviewing with Molly Merriman in America. Again, we're able to access training from the other side of the world, and this is training to conduct interviews on Zoom, which we are planning to do after Easter. So that was a whirlwind tour, and I am now going to stop and give time for questions.
Thanks very much, Richard. So I'm just going to let people unmute themselves again. And just again, maybe just if people want to unmute and give Richard a quick round of applause. That was fantastic. And just to say as well, whenever we're doing follow-up from this, I'm sure we could circulate to attendees the information about Richard's Heritage Project, in case anyone here does want to attend some of the events or volunteer. So, right. Anyone got their hands up or have a question? We have about 5 minutes. I'm going to be ruthless on your own instructions. So anybody got a question about the project? I'm just looking around.
Hi, Adam. Do you mind if I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Danny. I'm not Lisa. But much for that really interesting chat, Richard. It's lovely to hear a little bit about what you've been working on. I was wondering if you could tell us about the hidden queer of Ulster, or is that to be confirmed on Monday evening?
I think that's the lesser Ulsters, lesser queer spotted Protestant. I've mangled that as well.
Thank you. We got there, Adam.
Just to say that, yeah, come along on Monday. If you can make it on Monday, there'll be a recording, but I went for a provocative title in the sense that I do think a lot of our history is hidden, and I've used the word queer because I find that a helpful term when we're talking about a longer period of history, because I do intend going back to the 19th century. I'm really pleased that you're curious, but you'll have to wait till Monday to have that curiosity satisfied. Thank you for the plug.
Okay. Anybody else? We do have we have 4 minutes left in case anybody does want to. I would just, I myself would say I've had the pleasure of working. I've known Richard for quite a long time, but I've had the pleasure of working alongside you on this history side of the community, and it's just been really interesting. And I just want to say, like, with limited resources in a short space of time and COVID, you have done an absolutely amazing job of building this project up. You should be very proud of your work and the relationships that you've built up and the huge interest that's been generated. Orla, did you have your hand up there? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to say something very similar. I think it's amazing what's been achieved with a new project that was set up and then hit the challenge of the pandemic, which meant that a lot of the things that you had planned, weren't possible. And I think that what you have achieved in that time has been amazing. And I'm jealous of the level of engagement that you've managed to create with your volunteers and all the kind of amazing work that the volunteers have managed to create as well. Like, so that you're building a body of work with every step that you're doing. So, I just think it's been fabulous. So well done to everybody involved.
Thanks so much, Orla. Yeah, that's good to hear. There are advantages and disadvantages of projects which are based around volunteers, because obviously we've achieved many things, but also, of course, with volunteers, you can make the same demands on them as regards time, I would hope that future projects will be adequately funded, because I know what you've done in Cork. So much of our LGBT history, no one else is going to do it unless we do it ourselves. But even when we do it ourselves, it is labor-intensive work, and I don't think people realize how labor-intensive it is. Mm-hmm. Even something like the digital archive, there's huge challenges there around copyright or permission, which people wouldn't be aware of. There's a lot of history to be done. There's more material out there than we realize, but I think it's going to take us longer. This is a generational project, because there are just so many different tasks, and like collecting physical materials, doing interviews, and even with that, there's such variety within our community. You want to interview gay men, you want to interview lesbians, you want to interview trans, you want older or younger, Black, migrant. It's a huge area of work, but it's great to see more of it happening, and more interest, including, for example, the interest of the number of people who've turned out tonight for this event. So that's great.
Thanks very much.